today we're going to be looking at linear equations, and we're going to look at the different types of linear equations that you need to be able to solve, and then hopefully by the end of it you will understand what we need to do. Your task is to listen to the video, watch the video, take down the notes. So in your notebook, and I do need you to keep a notebook. I know we're virtual, but you still need to keep a notebook. I do need to keep a notebook. If you want to work in a binder, that's fine. Your notebook should be 8.5 by 11. You should not be doing math in small journal style books simply because there's just not enough space there for you to actually see all your work. And also for me to be checking your books. So please make sure you have either 8.5 by 11 paper and your binder, or you're using an 8.5 by 11 notebook. Okay, so we're going to go through solving linear equations. Now the rule of thumb is variables to the left, numerals to the right. So we're going to isolate the variable by keeping it to the left-hand side. And isolate means basically you just want it by itself. So here, what's in the way is this plus 3. And in order to remove or undo the addition, we have to subtract. Now, I'm showing it as arrows. By the end of this set of notes, you'll notice I'll stop showing the arrows. And what I would like is for you to be able to see those arrows in your head, and you don't need to write them out. So now we have 35 minus 3 gives me 32. Now we have 4n equals 32. The n is there, but it's still not by itself. It's being multiplied by the 4. So we now have to undo multiplication, and that is done by division. So we're going to divide by 4, and that gives us n equals 8. Now, something you will be asked to do in certain questions is to check. And the way we do a check is as follows. So you're going to write the word check, because that's what we're doing. And we then must break up the equation or separate the equation into the left-hand side and the right-hand side. And that's very important. You cannot do a check by keeping them equal. Then you're not checking. In order to check something, you break it apart, and then you work with each side, and you show that they're both equal. Therefore, you know you've got the correct answer. So here, the left-hand side, and this step is also important, you have to actually write out each side as it was given in the equation. So that's what they gave us, right? And now is where we do our substitution, meaning we substitute the value we got. So we got n equals 8, so we're going to put an 8 there. And then here, I don't want to see, like some of you like to show me all these calculation steps, and I don't need to see that. All right, we all have calculators. I need to see that just the answer that we get. So when you put that into your calculator, you get 35. So I can see, now on the right-hand side, there's nothing to do because it was just 35. So here we know that the left-hand side is equal to the right-hand side. And that tells us then that our n value is correct. Now, if you don't get them equal, then that means your n value was incorrect. And you have to go back and check your work. Some of you do the check, and then you show me that they're not equal, and you leave it as they're not equal. No, if they're not equal, then something's wrong. We go back and we fix it. Okay, so question B, as you can see, looks a little more complicated. We have our variable occurring more than once. We have brackets. Now, in the polynomial section where you revised work from last year, where we had to multiply, I'm not going to put in the arrows to multiply, but we have 3 has to multiply by this whole bracket. That gives me 3x plus 6. Then it's a negative 2 that has to multiply by the next bracket, and that gives us minus 2x plus 10. And then we have a negative 1. Remember, when I don't write it, that's being multiplied by 1 up there. So when we distribute that, we're going to get minus x and then plus 2 equals, and then the same thing happens on this side, negative 2x minus 6 plus 11. Here, two things I want to draw your attention to. In an equation, you cannot have the equal sign happening like multiple times in a line. That's my equal sign. You can't put one here. If you put an equal sign over there, you're going to lose communication marks because that's improper math. Okay? And something else I want you to notice is that my left-hand side now has like terms. There's a lot happening here. So here, there's a lot going on. And so what I want to do is I need to simplify it. You always simplify both sides before you start trying to isolate the variable, okay? So on my left-hand side, I have x terms. So I have 3x minus 2x minus x. And that just gives me 0x. We don't write 0x because 0x means there are no x's. So if there are no x's, we don't write them, okay? The next thing we're going to do is we look at our numerals on the left-hand side. So we have 6 plus 10 plus 2. And that's going to give me 18. So there's 18. And now I'm going to look at the right-hand side. On the right-hand side, I have negative 2x. There's no other x's there, so that's going to sit there. And then I have negative 6 plus 11. And that gives me 5. Okay. Now we can start looking at isolating the variable and actually dealing with the equation as a whole. So we have 18 on the left-hand side. Now that's a positive 18. We don't ever write the positive sign for just a number because remember, if there's no sign in front of it, it is positive. So that means it's been added to the left-hand side. And so to remove addition, we must subtract. And on the right-hand side, we have a negative 2. And to remove subtraction, we must add. And what that gives us then is 2x equals, and 5 minus 18 gives me negative 13. And here we have 2x. We don't have x yet. We now need to divide by 2. So when we divide by 2, we're going to get negative 13 over 2. Do not give me mixed numbers. Do not give me decimals. Leave it as an improper fraction, okay? All right, now to the next style, and that is when I have fractions, okay? Now, when we have fractions, we have to look at, and there's a process that I want you to master, adapt, and apply, okay? Not adapt, don't adapt it. Master this process and apply it, okay? So the first step whenever we have this situation is we have to identify the LCD. So we have to find the LCD. And I'm going to try to color code what we're doing so that when I write the step, then I'm going to show that step. So here we have denominator is 4, 8, 2, and remember in a whole number, the denominator is 1, okay? So the LCD between 4, 8, 2, and I guess 1 is 8, okay? So this is finding the LCD where you write it. LCD equals 8, okay? The next step is effect the LCD. And the way we do that is that's identifying what do I multiply by to get the LCD. So here, this has to multiply by 2 because 4 times 2 gives me 8. This multiplies by 1 because 8 times 1 is 1. It doesn't multiply by 0, okay? This multiplies by 4 because 2 times 4 is 8. And here we multiply by 8 because remember the denominator is a 1 and 1 times 8 gives me 8. Okay, please pay attention to those brackets. Very important to have them there. Okay, I don't want to see you dropping those brackets. And then the last step, also very important, some of you still are not applying that, is drop the LCD. So now we have 2 times y plus 3 minus 1 times, y plus 2 equals 4 times y, so I just write 4y, minus 8 times 1, which is just 8. That's what you do. I'm not seeing the denominator there, okay? And that is now what's happened is I have taken this question that had fractions and looked all ugly, and I've kind of simplified the way it looks. So now it looks like question B. It actually looks a simpler version of question B because I have less brackets and less terms. And so here we follow the same steps we did in question B, and that is to multiply, because we're going to expand everything and get rid of my brackets. So 2y plus 6 minus y minus 2 equals 4y minus 8. And here, remember, you have to simplify each side before you try to deal with the equation as a whole. So here on the left-hand side, I have 2y minus y, just gives me y. And then I have 6 minus 2, gives me 4. The right-hand side didn't have like terms, so it has to stay like that. And now I start dealing with the equation and simplifying the equation, okay? So this 4 is being added. I want it to go away, so I have to subtract it. And then I have this 4y here on the right-hand side is being added to the right-hand side, and I want to get rid of it, so I have to subtract it. And what I end up with is negative 3y equals negative 12. I'm still not done because I have this negative 3 in my way. And so I have to divide by the negative 3. And that gives me y equals negative 12 divided by negative 3 gives me positive 4. I just want to show you how I would be marking a question like this in a quiz or in your homework or in a test. The first thing I'm looking for is you've identified the LCD, and that's how you're going to communicate that to me. You're going to write LCD equals and whatever it is. Then I'm going to look at this step. Over here is showing me that you've effected the LCD properly, okay, and that you have dropped the LCD, okay. Then I'm going to see that you have expanded everything properly. And then based on that, you would get a CA mark here and a CA mark here. CA is a continued accuracy or a carry down mark. And that means that I would be looking at whatever you have in this line and checking that whatever you wrote here would simplify to whatever you have down there. Okay. And then whatever you have here simplifies properly to here. Now, if for some reason, let's just say you had 3y equals negative 12, then your answer would have been y equals negative 4, okay? If you have 3y equals negative 12, but you still wrote y equals 4 instead of negative 4, then you wouldn't get the mark down here because your answer doesn't make sense with whatever you wrote above. And that's important. In math, it has to be logical, right? And I'm checking, do you know your math, not do you know the answer, okay? So that's very important. Okay, here. This question is different. Yes, it's a fraction, like we had fractions up here, except the variable only occurs in one term. So we can actually treat this like we did question A, where we're just going to look at isolate the variable. So to isolate the variable, this 1, which was being added, must get subtracted. And that then leaves me with 2x over 3 equals 5 minus 1, which is 4. And then we have this 3. And the 3, I'm actually going to remove my arrows. I'd like you to be able to kind of see the arrows in your head. Now the 3 is being divided, so we need to multiply it. So when I multiply it, 2x equals 12. And now the 2 is being multiplied, and so I need to divide it. And when I divide by 2, I get x equals 6. Okay, so that's the lesson on linear equations. Your task, just as a reminder, is you need to make sure you've watched the video and taken down your notes. You need to have all these notes taken down. If there are any questions that you have, please just make a note of the questions that you want, jot them down, put a little asterisk next to them, and then we will go through that tomorrow in class.